She trained him, coached him through every client call, proofread his proposals. Now he gets the praise, while she hands in her resignation, and HR finally opens her file. The coffee in the office break room had always tasted like burnt cardboard, but that morning it hit differently. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the way the HR intern had looked at her when she walked in, like she was already a ghost floating past the water cooler. Rachel adjusted her blazer, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and walked straight to her desk. Everything was in its place. The ergonomic chair she'd fought facilities to approve, the double monitors, her trusty sticky notes in a neat grid like quiet sentinels of order. 6 years, 4 patents, a client base she'd built from scratch. She'd given everything, time, loyalty, her weekends, her voice. And then came Tyler. Bright-eyed, fresh out of grad school, with a LinkedIn full of buzzwords and a handshake that lingered a second too long. She'd trained him, of course, because that's what team leads do. She'd cleaned up his sloppy presentations, rewritten his client pitches, even coached him through his first Zoom with the CEO. It wasn't resentment that brewed as she watched him rise. Not at first. It was fatigue. A silent, bone-deep exhaustion that began to weigh more than her accomplishments. The room buzzed as the CEO entered, flanked by his usual entourage. The team stood, and so did Rachel, even though her knees hesitated. 4 months, the CEO announced, clapping a hand on Tyler's shoulder. And already making waves, we need more people like this. Laughter, applause. Rachel didn't move. HR had said they were reviewing performance. She had no idea this review included clapping seals and parading interns in suits. Her eyes met Tyler's for a split second. He looked guilty? Or maybe just caught. Later, she sat at her desk, watching her cursor blink in a blank document titled resignation_notice_RL.pdf. A knock on the divider. "You okay?" asked Jenna from finance. "That was awkward." Rachel nodded, lips tight. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Her hand trembled slightly as she uploaded the file to the HR portal. Not dramatic, just done. The moment it was in, she stood up and walked to HR herself. She wasn't going to let her legacy become a forgotten draft in someone's inbox. Sasha, the HR coordinator, was sipping a matcha and scrolling her screen absently. "Oh, Rachel, hi." "I just submitted my resignation," Rachel said, calm as a closing statement. Sasha blinked. "Wait, what?" 6 years, 4 patents, tenure ends next Friday. I've left documentation, client contacts, everything. Sasha's screen lit up. Her mouth opened slightly as her gaze trailed the screen. Oh. That "oh" held weight. Outside the glass wall, Tyler was laughing with another manager, no idea what was unfolding a few feet away. "You were listed as individual contributor," Sasha whispered. "But there's IP tied to your name. I didn't know." "Not many did," Rachel said. "But I'm sure Tyler will figure it out." She turned to leave. "You weren't just an employee," Sasha said, almost involuntarily. Rachel smiled without turning back. The echo of that moment followed her all the way to the elevator, and as the doors closed, for the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. The resignation spread through the office like a caffeine-fueled whisper, first to Jenna in finance, then Leo in legal, and by lunch, even the guy who only came in on Tuesdays for the free bagels knew. But Tyler? Tyler was oblivious. He strode into the conference room with the swagger of someone who thought team effort meant my spotlight. He didn't notice the shift in the air, the way voices lowered when he entered, how eyes didn't linger on him like before. He clicked open his presentation, animated graphs bouncing onto the screen with obnoxious flair. He'd scheduled this client pitch without looping Rachel in. Her client, her deck, her relationship. She had seen it pop up in her calendar invite the night before. He hadn't even changed the footer she'd created. At her now cleared desk, Rachel sipped coffee from her thermos, real coffee, not break room ash, and stared out the window. It was drizzling, the kind of soft rain that makes the glass look like it's crying. It mirrored something inside her, not sadness, but a kind of mourning, for the years spent being too polite, too patient, too damn professional. 2 floors up, HR was having its own little storm. Sasha had gone digging, 1 patent, sure, but 4? With documented prototypes, signed off by legal, archived in folders Rachel had built herself. It wasn't just impressive, it was defensible. Who authorized her to be listed solo on these? Asked Mark from legal, tapping his pen against the table. No one, Sasha replied, because no one thought she'd need to be. She didn't ask for credit, she just did the work. And that's when it hit her. Rachel had never played office politics. While others networked during Zoom happy hours, she wrote code. While juniors tagged execs on Slack threads to be seen, she quietly fixed back-end issues that made those execs look good. She had built the engine and let others drive. Meanwhile, down in the meeting room, Tyler was tanking. The client, an old-school manufacturing firm from Ohio, wasn't impressed by his buzzwords. He stumbled when they asked about data projections. When one of them referenced an earlier patent Rachel had developed, Tyler blinked. I believe that's part of our legacy stack, he offered vaguely. Dead air. Someone typed something. Upstairs, Sasha made a call. It wasn't protocol, but this wasn't a protocol kind of week. Rachel, she said when the line picked up, can you come up to Conference B? There was a pause. Why? You're being requested. By the time Rachel walked into the room, her presence hit like thunder. Hair tied back, portfolio in hand, eyes steady. The clients straightened in their chairs. You must be Rachel, said the older man at the end. Your name's on 3 of the files we were reviewing. Tyler tried to speak. Rachel didn't look at him. I'm here to answer any questions, she said calmly, settling into the chair beside him. The room shifted. Respect doesn't need to shout. It arrives with silence. When she explained her part in the technology, how she had built the system they were now proposing, the client leaned forward, engaged. The pitch, reborn. Tyler looked smaller with every minute. And Rachel? She was luminous. At the end, one of the clients asked, Are you still with the company? Rachel glanced at Sasha. For now, she replied, with a smile that said everything and nothing. When the call ended, Tyler remained seated, pale. You could have let me drown, he muttered. Rachel stood, adjusting her blazer. I'm not here to watch anyone drown, but don't forget who built the boat. Outside, HR had already updated her file. Sasha added a note at the top. Key asset. Do not overlook again. The office wasn't the same anymore. Not for Tyler. Not for HR. And definitely not for Rachel. She thought the resignation was the end. But something bigger had just begun. Ever left a place quietly, only to have your silence echo louder than words? Follow, to see what Rachel does next. Tyler didn't show up the next morning. Some said he'd taken a sick day. Others whispered it was stress leave. But Rachel knew the real reason. Shame had a way of making people vanish, especially when it finally caught up in front of clients and HR. The office felt different, as if something invisible had shifted overnight. People nodded at Rachel in the halls now. The barista downstairs gave her a free double shot just because. And when she passed Sasha's desk, there was a quiet reverence in the way the young HR rep closed her email and looked up. Conference room, CEO wants to see you. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Now? Sasha nodded. He's waiting. The CEO stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, city skyline behind him like a painted backdrop. He didn't smile when Rachel entered, nor did he gesture for her to sit. "I read your file," he said simply. "All of it." The room was thick with unsaid things. The air conditioning hummed like background noise to tension. "You never asked for a promotion?" "I was told I needed to wait my turn," she replied evenly. "You filed patents under this company's name." "Yes?" "Without demanding co-authorship." Rachel tilted her head. "Because no one offered, and I wasn't about to beg for credit I already earned." A pause, the kind that tests both people in the room. The CEO leaned against the glass. "I won't insult you by pretending I noticed your work before this week. I didn't, and that's on me." He folded his arms. "But if you rescind your resignation, I'm ready to make some overdue changes." Rachel didn't blink. "You want to keep me. I want to make it right." "That's not the same." Another silence. Then finally, he nodded. "Tell me what you want." That stopped her, because she hadn't let herself ask that question in 6 years. She'd always assumed it didn't matter, because the game was rigged, because politics won over performance, because women like her were told to be team players until there was nothing left of the team. Now, she stood at the edge of power, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. "I want a role where I'm not treated like a backup plan," she said slowly. "I want authority to direct my team. I want my name on what I build. I want junior staff who show real promise, not just polished resumes. And I want a seat at the table, not as a token, not as decoration, but as a voice you listen to before things go wrong." He watched her with the measured look of someone used to hearing demands. But not like this. Finally, he extended his hand. "I can work with that." Rachel didn't shake it. Not yet. "I'll think about it," she said, turning toward the door. "After all, I have options." Because now she did. Rachel didn't go back to her desk, not right away. Instead, she took the elevator down to the mezzanine cafe, where the windows faced the street and the chatter was just far enough from the office walls to feel breathable. She sat with her coffee, watching umbrellas move like thoughts across the glass. For the first time in years, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing, and that terrified her more than staying ever had. Her phone buzzed. Unknown. Number: "You don't know me, but I saw what you did in that meeting. Respect." 2 minutes later, another ping. Jen_legal. "Just saw your patents. Honestly, I'm embarrassed we overlooked them. We're flagging it for legal IP revision." Then, Sasha_HR. "Can we talk? There's something I want to ask you off the record." Rachel stared at the screen. The silence she'd lived in for years was being replaced by a new kind of noise, one that sounded a lot like recognition. Sasha was waiting near the lobby, visibly nervous. "I don't want to overstep," she said. "But would you consider consulting for HR?" Rachel blinked. "What?" "You know where the system breaks. You've lived inside it, and we need someone like you to help fix how we evaluate internal talent, how we retain women like you, how we don't let another Rachel fall through again." It wasn't a title. It wasn't a promotion. It was something rarer, a chance to change the system from within. Rachel didn't answer right away. The cafe lights above flickered slightly, casting warm reflections on Sasha's hopeful expression. "I'll consider it," she finally said. "But on my terms?" "Of course," Sasha said, already exhaling like she'd been holding her breath. Back upstairs, the office felt warmer somehow. Not literally, the AC was still too cold, but in the way people glanced up when she walked by. in the way Jenna from finance brought over a cookie for no reason, in how someone had placed a sticky note on her monitor. "Thanks for opening the door." She didn't know who had written it, but it didn't matter. The point was, someone was watching, learning, and she wasn't invisible anymore. That evening, Rachel walked home instead of taking the subway. The sky was bruised with sunset, the air thick with that golden hour calm that made the city feel softer than it really was. Her heels clicked in rhythm with her breath, steady, measured, like her thoughts. She passed the building where she'd once given a talk on innovation in legacy systems, back when no one in her own company had cared. She remembered standing at that podium, seeing only a handful of faces in the crowd actually listening, and still giving everything she had, because she believed in the work, not the applause. Her phone rang. It was Elias, a recruiter she'd met once at a tech event in Austin. They'd spoken for 5 minutes over lukewarm wine and lukewarmer shrimp cocktail. She hadn't thought he remembered her. "I heard what happened," he said, skipping the hello. "I don't know the details, but your name is circulating, and not just in HR circles." Rachel stopped walking. "In a good way?" she asked, cautious. "The best way. I've got 2 companies that just sent me feelers asking about a senior innovator with documented IP and leadership potential. I didn't even mention you yet." Something in her chest shifted. Not ego, something older, something she'd almost buried. Value. Real, market visible, unquestionable value. "Send me the briefs," she said. That night, she opened her laptop, not to finish someone else's deck, not to clean up someone else's code. She opened a blank doc and titled it, Terms of Engagement. She began writing what she wanted, not what she would settle for. Remote first flexibility, clear credit lines on patents, a culture of mentorship, not burnout disguised as hustle. An HR pipeline that didn't rely on loud voices but tracked actual contribution. By midnight, she'd outlined more than a contract. She'd outlined a new architecture for how she'd live, work, lead. It wasn't just about leaving a company anymore. It was about redesigning the conditions that made her feel small in the first place. And this time, she wasn't asking anyone to approve it. By Friday, the resignation clock ticked to its final hours. Rachel arrived early, before the HR team, before the buzz of keyboards, before the smell of burnt coffee could infect the air. She stood alone in the office, sunlight just beginning to slice through the blinds, casting long, golden shadows across a space she once thought she'd retire from. She wandered, touched the frame of the patent certificate that hung, dusty and half-crooked, outside the CTO's office, her name printed there in size 10 font, under the larger team label. Paused in front of the whiteboard near product, still scrawled with half-faded markers. Prototype pending RL review. Her initials, not even her name. So much of her was written in disappearing ink. That was about to change. At 9:07 a.m., Sasha met her at her desk, cheeks pink with urgency. "The CEO wants a final answer before noon." Rachel nodded. "He'll get one." At 10:42 a.m., an internal email dropped, marked confidential. Rachel had been CC'd. It was a draft, a proposal, a new head of strategic innovation role. With her name. With a salary bracket twice her current pay. With global IP oversight. She stared at it, not out of greed, but awe. But then came the detail that made her chest go cold. Reports to Tyler S. Tyler? A promotion, clearly done in parallel. Damage control, optics. She stared at the line like it had teeth. At 11:10 a.m., she was in the glass conference room, the CEO seated across from her. "I assume you've seen the offer," he said. "I have." "And," Rachel looked him in the eye, "tell me why I'd report to the man I trained." He hesitated. Experience is different, he began. Rachel raised a hand. Stop. You said you'd make it right. This isn't right. This is you putting a fresh coat of paint over structural rot. The room quieted. She continued, voice steady. You have a chance, not just to retain me, but to change the way this company works. Or you can patch the PR wound and pretend your house isn't on fire. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Give me an hour. Rachel stood. I'm not waiting. He raised a brow. I'm not waiting here. And she left. Back at her desk, she packed slowly, with purpose. The framed photo of her and her sister, the plant Jenna once gave her, her original wireframe sketches from patent number 3, folded and yellowed but still brilliant. Her laptop pinged. One new message. Subject, revised structure. She opened it. A new chart. Rachel Lane, VP, Innovation and IP, reporting directly to CEO. She smiled, not because she'd won, but because she hadn't settled. The goodbye was not what she'd imagined. There were no cupcakes in the break room, no awkward speeches, no HR-mandated balloons. Instead, people came in 2s and 3s throughout the morning, some with coffee, some with handwritten notes, some with nothing but heavy, apologetic eyes. Jenna from finance hugged her hard, whispered, You changed how I see myself. Even Leo from legal, stiff as always, muttered, Should have fought harder. Next time I will. But the most unexpected moment came at noon when Tyler stepped off the elevator. He looked smaller, not physically, just stripped of the unearned polish that once cloaked him like a second skin. His tie was crooked, his eyes tired. Hey, he said, lingering by the edge of her cubicle. Rachel looked up, calm, not cold. Just done. I didn't know they'd offer me that role, he said. If I had, you would have declined? She asked, tilting her head slightly. He didn't answer. I didn't mean to take credit. I just rode a wave I didn't see you were under. Rachel regarded him a long moment, then said, We don't always mean to climb over people, but that doesn't mean we didn't. Tyler exhaled. I don't want it like this. She nodded. Then don't take it. He blinked. She closed her box. Leadership isn't a title, Tyler. It's a mirror, and it's already showing you things you're trying not to see. He left without another word. By 3 p.m., Rachel handed in her badge. The walk to the elevator felt weightless, like gravity had finally let go. But just as the doors were closing, Sasha appeared, slipping inside at the last second. You're leaving with grace, Sasha said softly. But the company's keeping a debt. Rachel smiled, tired but proud. Then pay it forward. Sasha nodded. We will. The elevator hummed downward, its chrome walls reflecting 2 women standing shoulder to shoulder, one staying to build something better, one leaving to build something greater. And when the doors opened onto the street, Rachel stepped out into a world that, for the first time in years, felt wide open. 3 weeks later, her mornings began with birdsong instead of inbox pings. Rachel had traded her office view for the wide windows of a quiet co-working space nestled in a sunlit corner of the city. Plants thrived in every corner. The coffee didn't taste like regret. And no one knocked on her door asking if she could just look over this real quick before the 9 a.m. Zoom. She had said no to the corporate counteroffer, not out of bitterness, but clarity. Now, her time was her own, and it was already in demand. Her inbox, once full of petty follow-ups and office drama, now brimmed with inquiries from firms seeking her insight on innovation, IP strategy, and culture repair. She'd signed 2 advisory contracts, well compensated, respectful, fully remote. One company had even asked her to help design a mentorship program for women in STEM. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd had to leave the system to be valued by it. One afternoon, her sister Mia called. "I saw that interview you did," she said. "You didn't hold back." Rachel laughed, stretching her legs across the warm wood floor. "I didn't name names." "You didn't have to. Every woman watching knew exactly who you were talking about." Rachel's interview, quietly published on a niche leadership podcast, had gone viral. Not explosive viral, but wildfire viral. HR professionals, tech founders, burned-out engineers, all resharing the quote that had cut straight to the nerve. If brilliance isn't visible unless it's loud, then your system isn't measuring brilliance. It's measuring ego. She wasn't trying to be a voice for anything, but the silence had gone on too long, and people were listening. Later that week, she received a package, no note, just a slim black notebook. Inside, a single sticky note. "You helped me stay. S. Sasha." Rachel smiled. A small one, the kind that lives deep in the chest. She opened the notebook, flipped to the first page, and began to write. Not code, not strategy, just thoughts about dignity, about legacy, about all the invisible work women do to keep the machine running, and how sometimes the boldest act isn't leaving in flames, but walking out so quietly the walls finally echo your absence. She wrote until sunset, and then she wrote some more. The call came on a Thursday, just after lunch. Rachel had just finished a mentoring session with a young engineer from Sao Paulo, a brilliant woman with ideas sharp enough to slice through legacy systems. They'd talked architecture, career strategy, and what it meant to build in silence while others took the credit. Rachel was smiling, energized, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, Bay Area code. She answered cautiously. "Miss Lane," said a crisp voice, "I'm reaching out on behalf of a private executive board. We're assembling a task force to rethink IP attribution standards in corporate settings. Your name came up, repeatedly." Rachel sat straighter. "What kind of task force?" "One that's going to rewrite policy, not just post about it." She didn't respond right away. The voice continued. "We want thought leaders who've lived the problem, not just studied it. Your background makes you rare." Rachel stared out the window at the sycamore trees shedding their leaves. The world was changing, and somehow she'd become part of that shift. "I'm listening," she said. By the end of the call, she wasn't just joining the task force, she was chairing it. Later that night, she pulled up a photo from 6 months ago, one where she sat at her old desk, pale from overwork, the weight of everything she hadn't said pressing into her spine. She barely recognized that woman now. Her new calendar was filled with meetings that mattered, conversations with impact, projects with intention, and mentorships that rippled far beyond the walls of any office. Even Tyler, she'd heard, had stepped down, quietly. No fanfare, no LinkedIn farewell post. Sometimes silence says the most. At the end of the week, Rachel poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city buzz below. She didn't need recognition anymore, not because she didn't deserve it, but because she'd built something stronger than approval: ownership. Months passed, and Rachel's world no longer revolved around quarterly goals or last-minute slide decks. Instead, it moved with intention. She traveled to Berlin for a summit on ethical innovation, to Kyoto for a workshop on women-led design thinking, to Mexico City, where she met a group of engineers creating sustainable tech in under-resourced communities. Every place, every face, added a thread to the tapestry she was weaving, one not defined by tenure, but by reach. Back home, her co-working corner had evolved, A whiteboard now bore maps, mindstorms, fragments of future frameworks. Her plant had grown twice its size. Her email signature read, Rachel Lane, Independent Architect of Change. The title had been a joke at first, but now it fit. Then came the award. It wasn't the usual tech accolade, not shiny, not backed by the same companies that once ignored her. This one was different, the Athena Grant, for women rewriting the blueprint of leadership in STEM. She'd been nominated anonymously. The board contacted her, surprised she hadn't applied. "You've created a movement," the woman on the call said, "and you did it without noise." Rachel smiled. Noise was never the point. The award ceremony was small, held in a library with sun-drenched windows and too many ferns. No stage, just stories. When they called her name, she walked up, no speech prepared, no script. She looked out at the room, at the faces of younger women watching her the way she used to watch others, searching for permission to take up space. "I used to think invisibility was my burden," Rachel began, "that doing the work quietly meant I'd never be seen. But I was wrong." She glanced down at the medal in her hands, heavy in a comforting way. "I was always visible, just not to the people who knew where to look. The right people saw me, and now I make it my job to see them." Applause filled the room, not thunderous, but warm, lasting. That night, she sat on her balcony with a journal in her lap, writing down the one truth that had carried her from resignation to revolution. Silence isn't weakness. It's the start of something that doesn't need to beg to be heard. She closed the book, leaned back, and watched the stars blink alive, quiet, brilliant, and entirely on their own terms.